good afternoon all. Happy Friday. Thanks for bearing with us on a Friday in the worst traffic area in the country at the end of a long conference. Thanks for joining today. We're going to be talking about last year's Total Solar Eclipse event, last August, just over a year ago, and kind of our role as the lead application developers for what was the NASA West Prime contract and is now the NASA East contract. So we'll go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about us. Mobama, we're a full-service design and development shop here headquartered in the DC area, both serving federal customers as well as commercial clients. We do large agency support such as NASA, USGS, NOAA, and a number of commercial entities such as Mars Candy and some other political clients as well. With me, I've got Orrin Rohrer and Lucas Riutzel. Lucas is our technical director for NASA programs, and Orrin is our senior engineer, who leads our NASA.gov application development efforts. Nice little graphic. So today, this is the management track. So what we're going to be really focusing on are kind of looking at major event management, and how you can approach that from a project management perspective. And what's more interesting about that is how do you deal with the questions you can't answer or the questions that you don't even know to ask at the time. So we'll be kind of looking at that. We'll also be giving some of the technical overview of the kind of the steps we took to address a lot of the concerns around having such a large scale event happening with not a lot of information to start with, as well as some of the Drupal implementation efforts that we made in order to make this a seamless viewing experience for somewhere around 40 million folks when all is said and done. Just wanted to give you guys kind of a general idea of some of the importance of requirements gathering and sometimes the need for creativity and developing good trust with your clients. This is the requirements directly from the statement of work that we got from our NASA contractor. It was 3 lines. Well, there was some fancy language at the top, but for the most part, when you got down to the actual requirements, it was these 3. It was exactly written this way, and not a whole lot of details surrounding that. So you can kind of see where when you're talking about a large-scale event that happens like once every 1,000 years or something, this might cause some concerns. And then a couple of our challenges and kind of concerns from our side kind of going into this, obviously, were we didn't have a set number of streams that the client would be interested in hosting. We didn't even know the source location for a lot of these streams. We ended up hosting streams that included GoPros mounted to Raspberry Pi boxes on weather balloons, somewhere over Montana, and from boats out, off the shores of Charleston, South Carolina, as well as just, some feeds from the satellites and in locations around the world. We didn't know exactly how many people were going to come to this event on the web, how many folks would be on their phones looking at this, how many people would be at work, people just walking outside and taking a look and not caring that there's digital coverage going on for this. We didn't really know how long we needed to be worried and stay on our toes during the event to make sure that no issues were going to occur. We knew how long it would be over the country, but not how long people would come in beforehand to read up about it or how long after they would stay on to watch the coverage. And obviously, when we're a cloud-based application, so we wanted to make sure our hosting environment was solid and was going to be able to withstand the tremendous amounts of traffic that we were anticipating. That also, you then have like 15 other companies and groups that we had to play nice with, and everyone having their own piece, and making sure everyone wanted to share and keep everyone well informed. How many folks in the room are project managers? Okay, so good sample. And how many of you guys use, say, like Agile, Scrum methodologies, Kanban, stuff like that? Okay. So most of you. So we can all agree that that's kind of the way to go. So I'm not going to bore you too much with like talking through Agile concepts. You guys have probably gone to a number of conferences that talk about that. You guys understand what we're talking about. What I want to talk about more is just like when you're attacking, a situation such as this, major events, one-time opportunities. These are like Super Bowl level things, except for the Super Bowl gets to happen, once a year. This happens once every 100 years. So we're going to just talk. We're going to quickly go through, some of the the tools that we use in planning for this event and then executing this event, and talk about how they can be helpful in towards major event management, and also maybe just some different applications of tools that you're already familiar with but used in a different light. So we're going to talk about going through and the importance of not just going off of the client's requirements but developing your own, developing goals for yourself for delivering a high quality product. We're going to talk about the importance of coordination and collaboration with different partners, customers, stakeholders, anyone who could have a play in making this event successful or destroying it. Treat them equally. We'll talk about the importance of risk registries and identifying and documenting risks and how to bring those up. Talk about milestones, general Agile approaches, what we like to term as enhanced QA, and then last but not least, I instituted a no-fly zone, but for all intents and purposes, it's to catch-all for implement as many controls on your environment as possible, and beg, borrow, and steal, to get those controls if necessary. So as I was talking to in terms of requirements, so we had 3 bullet points from the government, and some people go look at that as not doing homework. We actually looked at it as our relationship with the customer has been pretty strong. We've been supporting NASA, for 6 years, just about, developing multiple applications, with our biggest one being NASA.gov for the agency. And there's a lot of collaboration that goes back and forth to where they understand that they can give us, kind of the broad strokes and allow us to go in and fill in the rest and identify the other gaps that we should be conscious of. So here we just have a list of the, some of the additional requirements that we kind of drew out, for ourselves, to, hoping to ensure that the event went off smoothly. Obviously, not breaking the internet was the first and foremost one. We really wanted to make sure that the user experience was solid and attacked from all different angles, from all the different digital media channels. We wanted to make sure that we limited load times and things that could cause hang-ups and cause users to not enjoy the app or to go away from it. And we wanted to provide some additional tools for the users to be able to enhance their day-long experience, including an interactive map graphic that we can demonstrate during the technical portion of this. So communication collaboration within the team. So obviously NASA, as a client, was easy to say, but it's really 5 different agency offices at NASA, including the Office of Communication, the Office of the CIO, Public Affairs, the Science Mission Directorate, as well as their social media and photography divisions, as well as and NASA TV. So a lot of those came into play. We also had a significant number of technology partners that came into play. We had 2 different CDN providers, one for static content, one for streaming content. We had video production specialists who were helping with the encoding, as well as the programming for NASA TV. We had our contract partners with our security team, our prime contractor helping with operations and logistics. We had 3 different streaming content providers, outside of the agency that, from a commercial sense, they're all providing their own streams in different formats with different players and all of the fun stuff that went along with that. And then obviously, using the Amazon services, within their cloud. So when you have a lot of players like that, it's important to know who all is responsible for what, and get them in as many meetings as you possibly can. Even if you're bored out of your mind because your stuff isn't coming up until 2 weeks before the event, or your stuff is already completed and shipped, it's important to have representatives in each of the meetings as possible, take notes, listen, and just be aware. You never know when someone is going to mention something that could have potential implications on what you and your team could be facing on that day. So coordinating all hands meetings regularly, just good touch points. They don't have to be long meetings. Just make sure everyone is aware of what everyone else is doing and have that open transparency. And also make sure that people are understanding the milestones that agreed upon as the team, and are communicating any risk to the schedule. It's a lot of trust in making sure that, hey, if my part is relying on this company doing their part on time in order for us to make our deadline, just making sure that communication channel is open and risks are being communicated early and often. Speaking of risks, keeping a risk registry. Something that we were joking about a little bit last night was that the day your project's risk registry is empty is the day you take your project offline. There's always going to be risks involved, no matter if they are damaging risks, if there's risks you can do anything about. But it's great to be conscious of. The above is just kind of a sampling of some of the risks that we were tracking throughout the project, and it's fairly straightforward to maintain, and it just calls out the high issues and identifying potential mitigation strategies and assigning ownership to who should be handling that risk. There are times that you're not going to, there's going to be a risk that stays on this board all the time. And at the time, for example, in this situation, the risk right at the top for unknown visitors, we had no idea, how many people would be coming. We didn't know how long they would want to stay. We didn't know if they were going to be that, that guy who goes in, opens the video, walks away to walk their dog, and then it just sits on the streaming page for 20 minutes. And we had no idea, and we never would know. Up until the day it actually happened. So it's okay to have things on the registry, but make sure you're using this kind of tool early and often. Bring it up in meetings. Have it be the first topic of the meeting to go through that, and just make sure that it's being tracked, it's understood, and that everyone is aware that these things can happen. It's also great for dealing with client relations. If you're your government customer, if you're communicating this and they understand and can expect something for that to happen, in the event that something could go wrong and does go wrong on game day, they're maybe not as mad at you. So, which is nice for us all. Milestones, pretty straightforward, when we're talking about, but like I said, everything really kind of goes back to communication and risk management. As we're setting our milestones, and communicating those dates and what the expected output and deliverables of each one are, so that your teammates can be making their, plans according to that. And again, communicating any risks to those milestones not being fulfilled on time, so that people can plan for that as well. Agile, as I've already said, and as most of you have already indicated, we are all very aware of Agile, so it's always nice to just stick with what you know in those Agile principles. Stick with your daily scrums, stick with your weekly customer meetings, your demos. Make sure to get working pieces of the product in their hands as early as possible, because inevitably they're going to change their minds. It can be the best thing in the world, they're still going to change their minds 3 or 4 times before it actually goes anywhere. So show it to them, make sure they like it, get everything in writing, sign off on it, and move on. Then we have the other side of QA, as we like to look at it. I know one of our other teammates gave a nice presentation earlier today about breaking things and building in time to, as DevOps engineers, to try and break your environment as much as you do for securing it. And that concept applies here when you're looking at major events. I feel like we can all agree that a lot of times we're writing test cases for our sites and apps that we're writing about how they should work. And in the ideal situation, how is this going to work? And I'm testing to those results. How often, though, do we really put ourselves in those unideal situations to test it under considerably harder circumstances? So it's a good thing that for QA to build in enough time for your integration testing, your UAT testing, but also break everything testing. Just go in there, reload the page 100 times in a row to see if you can overload the server with calls back, and open 2 videos one after the other to see if you can cause the player to skip. Just try and break things. I mean, one of the things I like Star Wars. If they had spent a little bit more time, taking the rebels, threat seriously instead of making sure they could blow up planets pretty easily, then maybe they still have a Death Star. The same concept applies to your apps and services. If you spend all of your time making sure that that home page looks exactly how it's supposed to do and that the login is working great, and you don't spend time to see what happens when 1,000 people try and load that page at once, and doing those things, then you might have a really nice looking home page until it crashes in 5 minutes. So dedicate some time in there. And as we were talking about risk registry and controlling your situations, most of the time, if it can go wrong, something will go wrong. Maybe not always in a catastrophic sense, but it's a good thing to plan for it. And so using your risk registry as a playbook of understanding where the risks are and knowing what mitigation strategies you can do. Some things are going to be out of your control, and that's okay, but some things are in your control. And sometimes you just have to ask really nicely to get your way sometimes. We had an incident about a year and a half ago, I think, with Amazon where some engineer accidentally fat-fingered some keys and it took down S3 for most of the day, if everyone can remember, and everyone was going crazy and lighting their hair on fire. But so it's chaos, it's a problem, it's a risk, it's out there. That, hey, S3 can go down and causes everyone's sites to go down as well. But what we look at that as a past event, and looking at the risk registry where we say, hey, Amazon could go down. Well, that's true. So what can we do with Amazon to kind of help mitigate stuff? We circle back and remember S3 going down and how it took one engineer's, two-thumbing something to cause everything to go down. So we asked Amazon nicely, can you guys not do anything for a couple days before the event and a little bit and during the event day? And they turned off all development on S3. No changes to S3 development were being pushed 2 days prior to the event and during the event. So sometimes chaos and bad things happening can be food for thought for future work, and sometimes you just have to collaborate with your partners to try and control things as best you can. Amazon still could have gone down that day, but one less thing that we didn't have to worry about is we knew it wasn't going to be some engineer in Reston causing issues with S3. And I was saying with chaos, sometimes embrace it. Look at you're gonna get problems. Things are not gonna always go your way. We did have an issue that morning about 5 hours before the event started, where we just noticed that some logs didn't rotate off of the caching server, and we hopped in. We saw it, hopped in, knew what to do, fixed it, and all before anyone really noticed that there was going to be an issue. So don't sometimes they can be helpful. Obviously, taking your past mistakes and building on top of them to further secure your environment. And not all chaos is bad. Sometimes it's good to introduce some chaos into your environment, preferably before the event, to keep testing and make sure that you hit all of your bases before it's showtime. So we're going to transition now a little bit into kind of showing how a lot of these considerations and tools that we use during the planning and management of the project, kind of played into some of our decisions, kind of going through. And I think one of the first curveball / chaos incidents that we had was involving decisions to institute Elasticsearch in our environment, which we had proposed to the client, several months prior, as a potential way of just general performance management and enhancements. And it sat on someone's desk for a couple months, and then they decided to sign it about 10 weeks before the event actually occurred. And I think we were given about 20 days to get it all in. So that was an instance of chaos being introduced into our environment at a very critical time. So I'm going to transition to Lucas, who's going to talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Austin. So I'll talk more on Elasticsearch here in a minute, but kind of going to go over what NASA.gov looks like as an architecture and kind of what we did to minimize our exposure. So NASA.gov is Drupal plus Ember as a headless front end, and that is what makes up NASA.gov. And this really allowed us to always keep scalability as an option of not necessarily having to have Drupal scale in the same way we scale our front end with Ember, and allowed us to keep the the front end of our website as static and immovable and reproducible as possible. When coming into a big event or going into any size event, the biggest thing is to know yourself, to know what is my exposure, what's my risk. And in our case, what we did is we looked at every endpoint, every possible place that could go wrong. You know, where are your images loaded from, your JavaScript, and do you have ads that need to be that are crucial, or video feeds? Every single one of those places are places where things can go wrong, and what we want to do is test each one of them and test and categorize those into, you know, what's absolutely critical and what's not. And if things aren't critical, then maybe you should think about, for this specific event, either just turning it off, or in our case, we knew that everyone was going to be going to a very specific page. And so we wanted to eliminate as much risk as possible on that page. And so we disabled quite a few third-party services on that page, so it wasn't, you know, maybe bringing up forums to query people about certain topics. And then also we took another approach of making everything that was on that page completely static. So even though we knew that the rest of the website had a dynamicness to it to make people, to try and get people involved, we wanted that page specifically to be as absolutely immovable as possible, at least in reference to our infrastructure. And this allowed us to minimize our amount of risk for this specific page. So I'm going to go talk show a little bit about the infrastructure. So this is our infrastructure before the event. There's a lot to it, but really it's a CDN in front of what's mostly a static site hosted in S3, but there's some dynamic queries that have to go back to our actual Drupal site that builds up what the content is supposed to look like. Mainly just a list of content that then it gets that static content from S3. This querying meant that Drupal did need to be online all the time, and it needed to be available, and if it wasn't, then our website was not going to display its content properly. When we did change our event page to be static, that did mean that if Drupal did go offline, our event would still go off without a hitch as far as the main the main page. But we knew that there was going to be some subset of people that were going to start navigating away from the event and try to browse the content. I mean, we have many editors that put fantastic content on NASA.gov. There's lots of great pictures. So we knew people were going to be navigating around. We wanted to make sure that content was always available. So we wanted to make this querying of this content significantly more reliable and more scalable. And as such, we implemented Elasticsearch. And in doing so, this is what our infrastructure changed to. It really took the load balancer in the middle, and we just split it off. We already had our first API, and we just made a second API that went over to Elasticsearch. So the infrastructure change for us was not wasn't actually a huge change. This was pretty easy. In AWS, we were able to just launch up an Elasticsearch cluster. The real work was in our application, our front-end application, changing over code to work with this new infrastructure. But this had a huge impact. So once we did this switchover, we saw immense reductions in CPU usage on our feeds. Almost all of our statistics dropped by 50, 60%. It was just, we became very over provisioned in our EC2 or our overall AWS infrastructure, and even though we didn't downsize any of our infrastructure before the event, we knew that we then had more room to grow if in case we needed it. And after the event happened, we could reduce our infrastructure costs and actually have this be a cost savings to the customer. So just to kind of show when we switched over to Elasticsearch, this is what happened to our database. Is we ended up going, you can actually see the daily ripples of people coming to the site and coming off the site, and it just disappeared. Everything's just gone. And this basically holds true. It doesn't matter. Even during the event, the solar eclipse event, this was pretty much true. We did not see a significant increase in traffic due to that, thanks to the pre-planning. So what can you do besides doing alterations to your infrastructure? There's some really simple things that you can hit up that affect all sites, which is, what are the caching control headers that are on your content, and how can those help you? And how high can you set them reasonably? You want to try and get your static content to be, maybe as close to infinite if you can. Drupal has some pretty great caching key headers that allow you to do that. That's certainly something that your developers should look into. But that's going to be a conversation with your customer as well. Is how reasonably high can we set it? Can we set it higher just for this event? Is there certain requirements that allow us to do that? Because the higher you can set it, the less load there's going to be on your servers and less risk. So yeah. Okay, so we made a change. How do we know it's actually had a good impact? So we want to test it. What we did is we took a product called Locust, which is a Python open source tool, and we made 2 large instances of this, and we started pounding our site. And we did this before and after we made our Elasticsearch change, and we had a noticeable impact. Instead of our server scaling and the latency of our requests going up, we were able to, after implementing the change, having the same requests have no noticeable impact on our infrastructure at all. And this is great for obvious reasons. Okay, and so then once we had our results and we felt confident that we had made the best improvements, or we had put forth our best effort, but we still wanted to be validated by a third-party source. We think we do testing pretty well, but that's part of what we do, and we wanted to reach out to somebody who that's all they do. And so we reached out to webperformance.com as a trusted partner of ours, and we had them really take their test to the max. In fact, they had to extend what they had ever previously done before as far as testing in order to meet the requirements that we wanted them to go to. And so we had them hit 10 gigabits a second as far as transfer speed. It's just it's an unheard of amount of traffic coming from all different sources in the world. It's a global test at global scale. And the outcome of this test reinforced our findings that for the pages that we were trying to make sure were always going to be live, we knew that they would be, and the pages that wouldn't, that the pages that were more dynamic would have minimal impact when hit with this number of requests. So now I'm going to move over into the actual user interface, and this is going to be done by my colleague Orrin Rohrer, who actually did a lot of the work on the user-facing implementation.
Thank you, Lucas. Good afternoon. All right, I'm going to, like you just said, briefly go over the front end. All right, so this is a desktop version. Like Austin had mentioned earlier, we had 3 bullet points, and so we had a lot of flexibility, which is really nice. We wanted the video to be front and center, so as you can see, we have that right there on the top, and then we wanted the users to be able to easily find the different videos that NASA had spread out across the path of totality. So as you can see here, they have a lot of options to choose from. We have the times. Yeah, so let's go on to the next slide here. All right, as you know, NASA.gov, it's a headless Drupal setup with Ember. We did this for many reasons. There's security. There's, on the performance side. One of them is flexibility of developers. We have front end, back end. With the decoupled system, we also have an easy, clear path to go to Drupal 8. All right, so this page, we wanted to make as static as possible, but we also wanted the content editors to be able to easily add the different streams. So on the Drupal side, we're using panels and we're using Panelizer. So as you can see here, they can add as many streams as they want to. And that was one of the things, we had no idea how many they were actually going to add. So that was a small hurdle. We created a custom module in Drupal so that they could go in and fill out the necessary fields for each stream. One of the things that we wanted to focus on was we wanted to be responsive. We also wanted mobile users to have a great experience. So as you can see here on the mobile screenshot, it's just the lists of streams, and then when you click on each stream, instead of having the user scroll up to the top, we have it to where the video would just pop right down below. Another one of the hurdles is we had three different streams, essentially basically 3 different players. So we basically had to hot swap the streams, if you will, because we had to make sure that we were loading the correct player and that it was a seamless change as the users would click on the different videos. All right. So one of the, it might not have been one of the 3, but each video that we used, or each stream, sorry, was an Ember component. And one of the nice things about Ember is with components is they're like little islands that you can reuse over and over again on the page. So that made it really easy. Really the only thing was just ensuring that we had the proper player associated with our Ember component. All right. So this was the map that NASA gave us. They said, we want the video, we want the stream list, we want the users to be able to click on the stream, and we want you to show, where the videos are, in the path of totality, but this is the map they gave us. So this is what we had to work with, and we thought we could do better. So here's a nice screenshot of what the actual map looked like. We had one of our developers, he made this whole map interactive. So what's really nice is if you hover over one of the streams on the left there, it will highlight, as you can see there on the East Coast, it'll highlight it in red where that stream is located. The map is interactive, so when you press play on the map, it will basically show where the path of totality is, so you can easily determine where you're at and what part of the totality that you will be in. You can also fast forward the map if you wanted to, speed it up, if you will. Yeah. And I got a quick demo right here. If I can. It's not playing. All right, so as you can see, this was the user experience from the desktop side, or a tablet would show the same thing. So we wanted to make it, interactive, and so it was really nice being able to use Ember. We can make it interactive, we can make it as static as possible, and make it perform, smoothly. Let's see. All right. So how did it go? Let's see here. We had a peak of 2.1 million users, concurrent viewers at the same time. We had over 40 million users on the site overall. We had 50 million overall on NASA.gov. So like what Lucas was saying, we had users go directly to our page, but then we also had 50 million overall, which means obviously quite a few users browsed around the site, looking at other videos and looking at other images and whatnot. We had 90 million page views on NASA.gov. Let's see.
This is all in the 6 hours of coverage. So this was just really...
Yeah, this was just in a 6-hour window. This is one of our great flashy stats here, is those other spikes, as you can see, were other events in the past that NASA had. The largest one prior to this was the supermoon, as you can see over there on your left there. And then we set a record for NASA.gov, and we set a record for all government sites, as you can see, just a small little spike there. But so it was impressive. We were very satisfied. Austin did a great job of basically getting all the players, all the stakeholders together, and it went off without a hitch. No S3 problems, nothing. It was. Here's another one. As you can see, the nice, curve there. The nice mountain is what we like to call it throughout the months there.
Anyone for care, this graphic is actually just our static assets and not the video feeds.
Yeah, this is just us hitting that static page. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Austin.
Yeah, just like I said, if you guys can pick some of the stuff out. So obviously we're talking about the kind of the add-ons to Agile and some of the project management skill sets for attacking major events such as the eclipse was. And as you can see, recognizing drawing your own requirements, taking the 3 that NASA gave us and the lovely PNG of a map they gave us, and and extrapolating on that and creating more. Constantly working to deliver value to the customer, who for us is not just NASA, but all the folks around the world who come to their site every day to get updates on the great work that they're doing. Looking at identifying risks that have happened either previously to us or just risks that as we are brainstorming about this event, how do we control the environment, how do we limit our exposure, how do we make things perform at an optimal level, how do we handle throwing an Elasticsearch, which I think Lucas actually made it sound a lot easier than it was. I think it was at GovCon last year we were implementing Elasticsearch while doing the conference as well. I had a lot of vacation days and Chinese food after that to the guys. But so we take all those things in stride and started to implement them along the way. We did have a great turnout. We luckily had no issues really during the event. I was kind of bummed as we were sitting there watching it. The infrastructure never flinched once. We never had a single scaling event, and I'm like, why do we go to all this effort? As you look back at the numbers, it's the work and the preparation that these guys as part of the larger team took in getting this thing squared away really showed. Obviously, we had 15 different contractor and government partners on the program. It encompassed about 200 people actively working on the event, from those who started about 2.5 years ago with some of the active planning for the media and some of the reach out to a lot of the colleges and universities that were participating in this as well, such as Montana State University, the Exploratorium out of California. So large efforts, all went off without a hitch, and everyone was very relieved when it was over, so they could all relax. I did want to give a kind of special thanks to a couple of the key government stakeholders who were managing this. Brian Dunbar is the web services manager for NASA and oversees NASA.gov and, as the public affairs officer. Mamta Nagaraja, who is was the point person from the Science Mission Directorate, representing Kristen Erickson, who is the chief of digital over there, as well as our friends over at InfoZen, now Mantech, us, MindPoint Group, and all the other great players involved. So that covers that, and now we can move into questions. Yeah.
Does NASA.gov still have the same infrastructure to see all the benefits to it? Or
Absolutely, yes. Still have the Elasticsearch. One of the things that we had to do in terms of, we talk about like mitigating risk and looking for that, is we loaded not everything into Elasticsearch in our first go around. That's where you saw like the 2 separate APIs and stuff coming through. So that's something that we started off, saw the benefits, and we've been safely doing it over time. Taking pieces at a time into monthly release cycles to get everything over. But yeah, tremendous benefits. It's like obviously the reduced bandwidth, and CPU usage allows us to save the customer money, which as contractors means that I may get more money to play with on other things if they have more money to spend. And it's kind of redefined some of our strategy with other applications we work on throughout the agency.
Just to add to that, ever since we implemented Elasticsearch and since the Eclipse, we've never scaled past 2 EC2 instances. We've always kept the same 2. So pretty impressive. We've never gone above 2 as we have before in the past with other live events.
Yeah, I know a couple slides back when we were looking at like the exoplanet event, I remember was in February of last year. That had 6 scaling events in the 1 evening. So, 6 events for only a couple million folks total came into that one. And our event, had no scaling events, and we continue not to see any. So we continue to enjoy that. Cost savings for all. Thanks. Other questions? Cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Let's just throw up our information up here. If you guys have kind of any questions or other kind of case studies coming up, please let us know, and we'd be happy to talk. We'll stay down here for a little bit if you guys have any additional questions. And for NASA news and knowledge, just FYI, some giant metal thing will be visible to our cameras on New Year's Eve. I was told that the day after the eclipse. I was told, hey, you're going to have to work New Year's Eve next year because we're going to catch some giant metal thing floating out in space for the first time. It's like, okay. So tune in if you guys aren't doing anything else on December 31st. So, thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your time.